So I'm Bhavya Nag. I work as a product marketing manager in the Azure platform group. And today I'm going to talk to you guys about Azure. So just a quick show of hands. Who here already has workloads and applications up and running on Azure? Right, so a good number of you. So for those of you who already have stuff up and running in Azure, this session will give you a good sense of whether you have the right design principles already in place for high availability, scalability, and also it'll give you a sense of some of the new tools and services we have for end-to-end monitoring on Azure and across your entire IT deployment, which might span Azure and other clouds or on-prem deployments as well. And for those of you who don't yet have workloads up and running on Azure, this will give you a sense of the best practices of how you want to implement and manage your environment. So let's get going. So here's a brief overview of the stuff I'm going to talk about. So I'm going to briefly cover the different phases in the life cycle of a typical Azure customer. That's you guys. Then I'm going to deep dive into two phases of the life cycle, the implement phase and the manage phase. And as I mentioned, as part of my presentation, I have a bunch of demos for some new tools that we have, especially for monitoring and diagnostics. And also, just to keep it interactive, I have a few quiz questions peppered around my presentation. And I have some cool Azure goodies that you guys can take home with you. So keep an eye out for those. All right. So this is what the typical life cycle of a customer looks like in Azure. You start by discovering the platform, learn more about what it can do for you. I'm guessing all of you guys are here, so you're already past that stage. Then you envision what your Azure workloads and applications are going to look like. And then you get into the stages which are going to be featured in this session, implement and manage. And overarching all of this is Azure support, and we want to make sure that we deliver the best customer experience to you guys across all phases of the life cycle. So let's do a double click into the implement and manage phases and a brief overview of the kind of stuff I'm going to talk about and cover in this session. So when we talk about the implement phase, the first thing I'll talk about is balance of responsibility. So what that means is that from Microsoft's perspective, we try to make sure that we deliver to you the most reliable cloud platform. But having said that, service disruptions will occur from time to time, and that's true of any service. And there are some things that you guys need to do as well to make sure that you're set up for success and make sure your applications are resilient and scalable. Then I'm going to talk about some best practices and recommendations to help you guys actually achieve that goal. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about our compliance story and the value proposition that offers to you as customers. Then we're going to switch gears and go into the last phase, which is managing your Azure workloads and your Azure applications. Here I'm going to talk about some new tools and services we have that make it very easy for you guys to do proactive and reactive monitoring, set up diagnostics, alerts, notifications, all the good stuff. And I'm going to also talk about how you can leverage some self-help tools that we've enabled on the platform. And of course, I'm going to talk about how to reach out to support when all else fails and you have to reach out to get help. All right, with that, let's dive into the implement phase. So I'm going to begin by describing some cloud service realities. So as I already mentioned very briefly, even though from Microsoft's perspective, it's our commitment to make sure that we deliver to you a reliable cloud platform, from time to time, service disruptions and service impacting incidents like outages are bound to happen. And that's true of any service. It'll be true for any cloud provider. And there are a variety of reasons why that would happen. So one of them is software will have bugs. Of course, we try to mitigate this by making sure that we have a rigorous change management and safe deployment practice. We roll out any change in a staged fashion in what we call rings of deployment, which I'm going to talk to you guys about a little bit later. Secondly, hardware will fail. So we have tons of hardware that's powering our Azure services sitting all across the world. And just an industry level statistic here, According to research, 3% of any given hardware installation will fail in a year. So what we do at Microsoft to protect against this is engineer the software to protect against this. And how we do that is we have a bunch of machine learning and AI services which are monitoring all of our Azure infrastructure across the world. And anytime we have a predicted fault, we have the processes and tools and people in place to mitigate the impact of that. And lastly, humans will make mistakes. And the answer to that, of course, is investing in automation as much as possible. And that's part of our staged rollout story. And I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about that as well. With that, let's talk about the balance of responsibility. So it used to be that in the on-premise world, you were responsible for everything, right from data governance and rights management to client endpoints, all the way down to the physical infrastructure, like managing the physical hosts, the network environment, and the actual data center, right? Now, as you start using Microsoft's IaaS, PaaS, and even our SaaS offerings like Office 365, that balance of responsibility gets more and more weighted towards Microsoft, right? But having said that, there are still a bunch of things that you guys need to do in order to make sure that your applications are resilient, that you have high availability and scalability, and that you're protected from platform-level outages and disruptions that might occur. And we want to bring you guys into the conversation, so I want to talk to you guys about how you can set yourselves up for success and some best practices around that. All right, so here are some high-level principles to think about when you're designing for the cloud. So first, you want to make sure that you don't have a single point of failure, which can bring down your entire application. So an example of that is having a single instance virtual machine powering your entire application. So a good practice in that case is to make sure you have multiple virtual machines in an availability set, and I'm going to talk more about what that entails. Secondly, you want to make sure that the components of your application are loosely coupled. So make sure that you don't have a single monolithic application in a single virtual machine, but you want to make sure that you have different tiers in your application. So an example of that is if you have a web app, then you want to think about having like 3 different tiers. So an application tier, a logic tier, and a data tier, right? And you want to make sure that each of these tiers is set up for high availability individually so that the entire application is resilient. And I'm going to talk more about that as well. Thirdly, and this is a key point of differentiation when you compare things to the on-premise world, build for scale out, not scale up. So it used to be in the on-prem world, the solution to growing your application would be to just throw more hardware at it, right? So you went ahead and set up a data center, and you took good care of it. You put in the best physical drives, the best network card, redundant power supplies. You took good care of that data center. And once your application scaled and you were nearing the limits of what that data center could do for you, the solution was to like rip and replace, go in for a bigger data center. Now, the problems with that approach are twofold. Firstly, costs don't scale linearly when you're scaling up like that. Like if you have a data center that's twice the size, your costs are actually much more than twice as compared to before. And secondly, your applications are still brittle, right? You still have that single point of failure. So in Azure, you have a much more intelligent way of scaling out as opposed to scaling up. So you can like build automated scaling for that particular process that needs to scale. And I'll talk about how you can achieve that. Process centrally, deliver locally. Now, if you have your data split across multiple geographies in the world, it can be a fairly complex process to like get all of those bits and put them all together. So with Azure, it's a lot easier for you to manage all of that from a central location. If you do need to do multi-region deployments for whatever reason, we give you the capabilities to achieve that, but that would entail higher complexity, and I'm going to talk about those considerations as well. And lastly, automate, automate, automate. People will make mistakes. And another industry level stat here, over 50% of data center level faults are caused by human error, right? So it's very easy to like think about, hey, every time I need to make a change, I'm just gonna make it, push it to the server, and I'm gonna do this every time. It's fast, it's easy, it's a bad practice. So whenever you have an operation that has any manual intervention, think about automating that. And I'll give you some examples of how you can do it, for example, for scaling with virtual machine scale sets. All right, with that, let's talk about some tools and resources that you can leverage to design for high availability and scalability in the cloud. So the first one is availability sets. So this is how you achieve high availability from the most basic standpoint in Azure. So instead of having a single virtual machine powering your entire application, you want to make sure that you have at least two virtual machines that you put inside of an availability set. Now what that does is it offers you protection from faults and updates. So let's talk about each of those one by one. So faults. So when you have two virtual machines that you've put inside of an availability set, it makes sure that it puts them in separate fault domains. And what that means is we make sure that they have independent power and networking infrastructure powering those machines. So anytime there is a physical fault that might bring down one virtual machine, the other one still stays up and your application is resilient. The second thing is update domains. So again, every time you have two virtual machines or more in one availability set, we from Microsoft make sure that every time we push out an update to the platform, we won't push it out at the same time to both virtual machines. So if the update causes some kind of disruption to your application, it'll still be resilient because at least some virtual machines will still be up and running. You also want to make sure that availability sets are tied to a role in your application. And what I mean by that is if you have a multi-tier application, let's say a web app that's web tier, logic tier, data tier, you want to make sure that you put each of those tiers, like all the virtual machines powering each of those tiers, into a different availability set. And that would make your entire application resilient because at least one virtual machine in each tier would be up, regardless of any faults that disrupt some of them. And you want to make sure that you put load balancers in front of every tier to make sure that your network traffic is routed appropriately. Also, keep in mind that having at least two virtual machines inside of an availability set is a requirement for having our financially backed 3 nines 5 SLA. So if you just have one virtual machine powering your applications, you don't get to take advantage of that. Now, having said that, a lot of our customers, when we talked to you guys, told us that it was near impossible for them to migrate to Azure simply because in their on-premise environment, they had a bunch of applications that were running on single instance virtual machines. And in many cases, it was too costly or too complex for them to re-architect those apps to a multiple virtual machine environment. So we've heard you guys, and we've recently made live our single instance virtual machine SLA, which is financially backed with 3 nines. The only requirement here is to make sure that your single instance virtual machines are tied only to premium storage accounts and not standard storage accounts. So premium storage accounts are SSD. And if you guys have mission critical apps, as a good practice, you should use premium storage anyway. The improvements that you get in terms of performance and durability is magnitudes higher than what you get with standard storage. And it's all about the IOPS, right? So you want to make sure that you use premium storage for your mission critical apps. And the price differential is like more than compensated for by the performance and durability improvements. We are the first global public scale cloud to offer single instance virtual machine SLAs. Our top 2 competitors do not offer this as of now. But keep in mind that this is still not a replacement for high availability, right? So you don't get to take advantage of fault domains and update domains that you get with availability sets. And also keep in mind that your SLA is slightly lower. You don't have 3 nines 5, but just 3 nines. All right, let's talk about scaling out in an intelligent way. What you want to do for that is use virtual machine scale sets. So what this means is that you have the stamp of a virtual machine, And you can use the image of that stamp to automatically create more IaaS as your application scales. And then what you can do is you can write scripts that say, hey, if my network traffic exceeds a certain threshold, deploy more IaaS so I can support the application and it doesn't go down with the increased load. And then when that network traffic goes down, you can like throw away the additional IaaS and go back down. And all of this can be done easily in an automated fashion. And you can set up virtual machine scale sets either using Azure Resource Manager templates, or you can do it from the Azure portal as well. Right. Now let's talk about deployment scale and multi-region deployments. Now everything that we've talked about so far, availability sets, and virtual machine scale sets, now they make your application scalable and highly available. Unfortunately, if there is a geo-level event, let's say an act of God or some kind of geopolitical event that brings down an entire region, then your application may still not be resilient. And if you have needs for resilience beyond that, then you want to think about multi-region deployments. And how you would actually go about doing it is making sure that you take advantage of paired regions. So paired regions give you isolation for faults, and what that means is that for every pair that we have, we make sure that those data centers are at least 400 miles apart. The only exception to that is Japan, because it wasn't physically possible for us to separate our data centers by 400 miles, but it's true in every other case. So what that means is that typically every pair, those data centers will be separated, will be separated by different climate zones. In many instances, they are in different floodplains, and even in different tectonic zones in some instances. So you're protected from like acts of God, earthquakes, those kinds of things. Another thing that we offer with paired regions is something called sequential updates. So it's kind of like update domains, but at a geo level. So we make sure that if we push out updates, we won't push them out to both regions in a paired set at the same time, so that your applications don't go down because of an update-related fault. And then a data residency. So for compliance reasons, some of you may have to make sure that your data resides in, say, Germany or China or whatever. And in those instances, you can still take advantage of our multi-region deployments and have data residency. Okay. All right. So quick quiz question, even though I already gave you a brief preview of the slide, but we'll go ahead with it anyway. Can anyone here tell me how many regions is Azure present in across the world? Okay. All right. Just make sure you collect your koozie. It's like a Azure beer sweater after the presentation. It's perfect for this weather. All right. Another thing you guys want to do is make sure that you don't have a single point of failure. Now, even if you're using availability sets, storage can potentially still be a single point of failure. And what I mean by that is, if all of the virtual machines that you've put in a single availability set are linked to a single storage account, then unfortunately, a storage level fault can mean that your entire application goes down, right? So as a best practice, you want to make sure you do two things. Firstly, make sure that not all virtual machines in one availability set are linked to a single storage account. And secondly, so like if you have to share storage accounts, make sure you're doing it across some virtual machines that might be in different tiers of your application or different availability sets, and not all virtual machines in one availability sets share a single storage account. And secondly, like I mentioned before, especially for your mission-critical apps, make sure you use premium storage. And as I mentioned before, the performance and durability improvements that you get are magnitudes higher compared to standard storage. Now, having said that, we realize that that's not an ideal scenario for you guys. You don't want to be in a situation where you've configured for high availability for your virtual machines, but then a storage level fault wipes out everything. So we've launched a feature called Managed Disks. It's in preview right now, and it's going to be generally available soon, so look out for that announcement. And what that does is it basically partitions your storage account into multiple fault domains, kind of like what happens with availability sets anyway. So this will ensure that your storage level faults will not bring down your entire availability set. Another thing that you guys should think about doing is using CDNs. That stands for Content Delivery Networks. And this is especially true for applications where you might be transmitting a large amount of data, especially video and audio content. So what CDNs do basically is they make sure that there is a local cache of your data in sites all across the world. So if you use Azure CDN, you have the option of using either Verizon or Akamai, and both of them have thousands of sites across the world. Right? And so the data is stored in multiple locations, and your customers can access it from a place that's closer to where they're from. And so that, of course, gives huge advantages in terms of latency. There's also some interesting security benefits, like protection from DDoS attacks and origin obfuscation. Those are not the main features of my presentation. I want to talk about high availability and scalability, and how CDNs help you achieve that is when your customers are pinging your applications, they're actually getting the data first from the CDNs, and only then do they ping your machines. So your machines are able to scale easier and cater to a larger load than they would have been able to if they weren't in the CDN. I want to talk to you guys about the resiliency spectrum. So all of the things I've talked about basically involve making choices, right? Do you want to have a single instance virtual machine deployment or multiple virtual machines? Do you want to have standard storage or premium storage? Do you want to have CDNs or not, right? And we realize that it might be overwhelming to think about all of these choices. So how you should think about is, where do you need to lie along the resiliency spectrum? And as you think about that, there are three key factors. So first is RPO and RTO. RPO stands for recovery point objective. RTO stands for recovery time objective. Now, these are fancy terms, but basically what it comes down to is you want to think about how many down minutes can you afford to have for your applications in any given time frame, right? So that's the first factor. Second factor, of course, is cost. As you go from single instance virtual machines to multiple virtual machines, or as you go from single region deployments to multi-region deployments, your costs will obviously go up. So that's another consideration that you guys should think about. And lastly, complexity. Of course, as you make these changes, your application is bound to get more complex. So you want to think about how much complexity are you comfortable managing across your IT organization. And then, like, considering all these factors, it boils down to an internal conversation that you guys have among your teams or with your external stakeholders, and decide on where you want to be. Now, with that, let me transition to a brief video from our resiliency team.
Keeping applications up and running is of utmost importance to any IT operation. There's time, money, customer satisfaction, or even individual or public safety at stake.
Microsoft is focused heavily on making sure that customers can improve their uptime. We have a dedicated resiliency team that spends 100% of our time working on how do we make that better. When you build on top of Azure, you get the benefit of all the engineering knowledge that Microsoft's cloud has brought to bear for every customer and every customer's needs. And as people are moving their mission-critical applications onto Azure, uptime is their business.
So Office Timeline is really a project visualization tool. We started out as an on-prem application. Over time, what we've realized is if we want to really scale the business, we have to move into the cloud. So we started out with one app service and one database. And since that time, we've organically grown to about 100 different resources in Azure. Any amount of downtime means revenue loss for us. And I can't remember the last time I've had to worry about reliability or scalability.
We really care about making sure that your uptime increases. There's a sign that sits in my office and it says, "We only win when the customer does." And it's true.
I would encourage everyone to take a look at azure.com/resiliency to get the expert guidance and best practices needed to build a resilient cloud.
Right, so make sure you guys check out azure.com/resiliency. All of the best practices I've shared so far are great canonical examples, but they're not a comprehensive list. So there's a bunch of other stuff that you guys can do, especially in the network layer and with other services. And if you go to azure.com/resiliency, it's going to give you a complete checklist and best practices and recommendations for how you can architect your Azure applications for high availability and resiliency. All right, with that, let's switch to our compliance portfolio. So as Jason Zander mentioned in the keynote presentation yesterday, we have the largest compliance portfolio in the industry. So this makes it very easy for you guys to get up and running, especially if you have compliance requirements that are specific to certain industry verticals or generic compliance requirements around safety and security of your applications. Now, the great value proposition for you is that if you were to go ahead and build these and obtain these certifications yourselves, it would be a huge exercise in terms of complexity and how time-consuming it would be and the effort it would require. So by renting from us, you can have that right out of the box instead of building it from scratch. And we continue to invest in our compliance portfolio. So the most recent one we have is ISO 22301. So this is a premium standard for business continuity, and basically what this means is that we have the people, the processes, and the tools in place to make sure that we can prevent, mitigate, and recover from events that might cause service-impacting outages to our platform. All right, let me talk to you guys about a new feature in the Azure portal that we launched sometime last year in preview. So this is public preview, which means that all of you guys can actually access it in your Azure portal right now. So this gives you actionable recommendations to improve resource availability, security, and gives you some recommendations to improve performance and manage costs better as well. And the great thing is it's specific to your Azure resources in the regions and environments and subscriptions that you have configured in your Azure portal. So think about it as your personalized cloud consultant. And as I mentioned before, it's launched in public preview, and it continues to get better as we get more and more data from the resources that are running on all your applications and environments across the globe. So here's a snapshot of how it works in action. So here's an example of some cost recommendations I'm getting to lower the cost of my applications. So here, as you can see, it's telling me that I have multiple SQL databases as part of my Azure environment, and I can potentially save money by combining them into an elastic pool. So an analogy of that is if there's 4 of you who are part of a family and you have individual cellular plans, it obviously is more cost effective for you guys to switch to a family plan. And that's pretty much what this is, right? And the cool thing is it gives you an idea of the estimated monthly cost savings as well. So make sure to check out this feature and see if you get some insights into how you can improve across availability, security, performance, and even lower your costs. Right, so I briefly talked about our staged deployment program. So we have what we call the Azure Canary program. This is our early updates access program. And basically, any change that we make on the Azure platform goes through a rigorous staged rollout process, so across rings of deployment. So the first one is our internal dev test environment, where we make sure that everything's working fine, nothing's breaking. And once we're confident of that, we roll it out to our internal stage environment. And once we are comfortable there as well, then we sort of roll it out to what we call the Canary ring. And this is where we would like to invite you guys to join and take part. So think of the Canary ring as your pre-production environment where you can get early access to tools and features and functionalities which are going to be generally available in the upcoming weeks. So as an action item, you guys can send an email to that email address on the top right, waeap@microsoft.com, and we'll tell you more about the Canary program and how you can join. And of course, once we have feedback from you guys who are in the Canary program, and we've implemented the changes which we might have to do in order to make sure everything's up and running properly, we roll it out to our worldwide deployment. And there, again, we have a flighting process where we make sure we are doing it in clusters. So individual fault domains, individual update domains, and then individual geos for paired regions as well. Right, so everything I've talked about so far has dealt with individual services in Azure and the underlying technology. But we also want to have a conversation with you about some out-of-the-box solutions that we offer. So think about these as being closely tied to business outcomes, which start from basic cloud scenarios and go up to more differentiated solutions like with advanced analytics or with things like doing predictive maintenance across your IoT deployment. So basically what this gives you is a bunch of reference architectures, pre-configured solutions, Azure Resource Manager templates, so you can get up and running right away. So instead of having a bunch of Lego blocks that you need to figure out how to assemble, we give you a nice packaged box with illustrations and step-by-step manual, so you can build a truck or a helicopter or whatever you want. So make sure to check out the solutions webpage. We keep adding to our list of solutions. It's a great way for you guys to start off if there's if there's specific business scenarios that you need to build your Azure applications for. Right, so let's talk about a summary of some of the implementation best practices that we talked about. Make sure you configure multiple virtual machines in an availability set. It's a core requirement for availing of our financially backed 395 SLA. Make sure that each application tier is in a separate availability set. Make sure your entire application is resilient, and put a load balancer in front of each tier to make sure network traffic is routed appropriately. Take advantage of fault domains and upgrade domains, and if you have very stringent resiliency and high availability requirements, think about how you want to deploy across multiple regions, taking advantage of our paired regions. Right, so as I mentioned before, check out the Azure Resiliency page, azure.com/resiliency. All of the examples I talked about are great to start off with, but they're by no means comprehensive. So on the Resiliency website, you'll get a comprehensive checklist and reference architectures for how you want to architect your applications and your Azure resources for resiliency. All right, with that, let's move to the manage phase. So now you've built your Azure applications, you have some workloads up and running. Now you want to make sure that you have a way of managing your applications end to end. Your internal stakeholders and your customers increasingly have very low tolerance for issues with resiliency and with bugs in services. People expect services to pretty much work like electricity, and people get very unhappy when they flick a light switch and the bulb does not turn on, right? So think about a time when you accessed your banking website and you logged in and you saw this big banner on top that said, hey, we're going to be down for planned maintenance on Sunday. And your first reaction to that is, what? Are you kidding me? You're a bank, you're supposed to be up all the time, right? And this is increasingly true. People expect services to be up and running all the time. And the mechanics of how you ensure that in the cloud are completely different. So long gone are the days when you would log into the specific machine that was running your website, and you would try to remotely diagnose and troubleshoot what's going wrong with it. So in the era of the cloud, you need new tools and new services to be able to manage your applications in a more resilient way. And I'm going to talk to you guys about one such way that we launched recently. It's called Azure Monitor. So again, this is also a new service that's in preview right now. But again, this is a public preview, so you guys have access to it in your Azure portal right now. So what this gives you is built-in monitoring capabilities for all your Azure resources across all your subscriptions. So it's a single entry point where you have all of your monitoring. It gives you out-of-the-box metrics and logs. You don't have to configure anything. You don't have to configure storage accounts or anything. It's just there. You can also set up alerts and notifications, so you can take actions even when you're not sitting in front of your Azure Monitor. And you can create a single dashboard that you can customize and share with other people in your team. And of course, we are a platform, so we provide APIs for third-party integration. So if you're already using an incident management software or an APM monitoring solution or chat ops, what have you, we provide first-class integration through APIs into those. And I'm going to talk about that as well. So here's a screenshot of what the monitor experience looks like. So you click into Monitor on your Azure portal, and it opens up this blade, which gives you everything that you wanna monitor in your Azure environment. So the first thing is activity logs, and that's basically a log of operations which have been made on your Azure resources. So were there virtual machines that were stopped or started? Who made those operations? Were there SQL databases that were deleted by someone? So you want to know that, because if there's something that goes wrong in your Azure environment, it's most probably because of a change that someone made. So you want to know what were the changes that were made, who made them, and what were the other things that were going on at the same time. So that's activity logs. It also gives you metrics on what's happening with your Azure resources right now. So what does my CPU or RAM usage look like? How fast is my SQL database going? All of that kind of stuff. Diagnostic logs, for when things are going wrong, you want a quick and easy way to be able to search diagnostic logs, and we have enabled first-class integration with Operations Management Suite, OMS, so you can not only look at diagnostics for logs in Azure, but if you have enterprise-wide IT deployments that span, let's say, Azure and on-prem, or even multiple public clouds like Azure and AWS, you can monitor all of those logs in one single location. And I'm going to show you guys how that works as well. And lastly, you want to make sure you can set up alerts and notifications. So like I said before, you're not sitting in front of your Azure Monitor all the time. So you need to have a way to make sure you can get notified by email, SMS, or webhooks that send data to third-party apps. And we provide a way for you to do that. The SMS and webhook capabilities are currently in limited preview, so you might not be able to access them right now, but we are working on making sure that they're generally available very, very shortly. Okay, with that, let's switch to a demo. Okay, so this is my Azure portal. Let me just refresh that to make sure that the network connection hasn't dropped out. Okay, so I'm going to go into Monitor. And just like you saw on the screenshot, it's like a single blade which has monitoring set up across multiple layers. So what you want to do when you think about monitoring is you want to think about 3 levels of monitoring. So the first level is platform level monitoring, where you get logs and metrics for your Azure resources, right? So virtual machines being stopped or started, or RAM utilization, CPU usage, all of that kind of stuff. That's at the platform level. What you might also want to do is think about a simple scenario where you have something like a WordPress website running on Azure. There, not only do you want to look at what's happening with your platform, with your virtual machines and your SQL Server, but you also want to get application-level insights. Things like how many people are viewing blog post 1 versus blog post 2, how many people are going to the About Me page. And we offer first-class integration to App Insights that lets you achieve that as well. The third thing you want to do is monitoring on a global scale. So as I mentioned before, if you have an IT deployment across Azure and on-prem, or across Azure and AWS, you want to make sure you have like one single space to monitor all those logs. So those 3 scenarios are what I'm going to demo for you. So beginning with the platform level logs, the first thing we have here is activity log. So here you can filter by resource type. So if you want to look at only virtual machines, you can do that. If you want to look at specific operations, you can filter to that as well. And you can filter to the specific time span you want to look at. What we also have up here is something called Quick Insights. So if you're new to Azure and you know very little about, hey, what does a resource group mean? What are the different resource types? We give you quick access to what we think are important things for you to focus on. So let's say I see here that I have had 11 errors. So I can click into that and quickly get a sense of what those errors were. And if I click into them, I can see a brief summary, and I can also get a JSON view that I can copy paste to an email that I send to my IT pro who can help debug what's going on. Now that's activity logs. And one thing I forgot to mention, these activity logs are available to you without you having to configure anything. You don't have to set up a storage account. All these logs are available to you, and you get a duration of the past 90 days. If you need your logs to be stored for over 90 days, let's say you have compliance requirements, and you can export them to a storage account that you've configured. Let's see. So here you can configure storage to a specific storage account, so you have logs for longer than the default 90-day period that we stored them for you anyway. And you can also export them to an event hub. So let's say you want to do some real-time streaming. You can push them from an event hub onto Azure Stream Analytics, and you can use something like Power BI to look at your activity logs in real time. So all of those are things that that are enabled from right within the portal. Next thing I want to talk about is metrics. So as I mentioned before, this is stuff like what's my CPU utilization on my virtual machines, RAM usage, how many requests are coming to my web apps. So here I have I've set up this demo web application, which is basically a loan processing application. It's a fairly simple app. You put in your details, and you can create a loan application. I won't go into the details of this application, but let's see if I can get some metrics for this right away. So let me go to the resource group where that web application lives. I'm going to select web apps as my resource types. And I'm going to go into the specific web app that I want to take a look at. So now, this right off the bat, this gives you a list of available metrics, and these are context specific. So it only gives you metrics which are specific to web apps. And I can select a few of them. So let's say I want to look at requests. I want to look at server errors. And it gives you a nice chart that you, if you wanted, you can pin to your dashboard. I'm not going to do that right now because I've already pinned a bunch of stuff to my dashboard, which I'm going to show you guys later. But again, these metrics are available to you at a granularity of 1 minute, and you have retention up to 30 days. And again, all of this is right out of the bat. You don't have to do anything to configure this. It's just there when you go into Monitor. Another thing you can do is you can look at alerts that you've set for your resources. So here's an alert that I've already configured. Let's look into how that works. So think about alerts in terms of 3 things. So there's a source, there's criteria, and there's an action that you want to undertake. So it's the source is coming from my metrics. The criteria is that in my web app, if the average response time on the server goes beyond a certain threshold, I want to be notified. And I can specify emails. I can specify a webhook if I'm using a third-party application for my performance monitoring on Azure, and I can get those alerts. All right, let's go into something else. All right, so that's as far as platform monitoring is concerned. I'm going to also talk to you guys about application-level monitoring. So what's happening on the individual web pages, for example? What are my page view load times, and so on? So again, we have first-class integration with App Insights. Let's take a look at how that works. I'm going to go into my loan application. And let's see if we can do a live stream. Oh, wow, there's a countdown. Very exciting. All right, so let's see if I can do a split screen to see how this live stream works. Okay, there you go. right? So I have my application on the right side of the screen and the live stream on the left part. Let's just reload this a few times and see what happens. Yeah, so every time I'm reloading, I can see a live stream of the incoming requests. It's strangely satisfying to keep doing this. But of course, it's useful to get started, but of course, you want to do more than just look at a live stream of your requests. And so here, if you go into analytics, it opens up the application insights page. And here you can write queries based on the application insights SDK. So I can look at stuff like page views, for example. Let's look at just 10 of them. And I can look at these logs. So the great thing is all of this is integrated right from within the Azure portal inside the monitor experience, right? And you can set up custom metrics as well, which might not be available off the bat, and you can look into those. There's first-class integration as long as your application is built on ASP.NET using the MVC framework. If you're using something else, you might have to do a little bit of instrumentation, but you can still look into application insights for app-level monitoring beyond what you already have at the platform level. OK, let's look at one more thing over here. I want to look at diagnostic logs. So every resource that you have in your Azure environment is already emitting a bunch of logs. And you can disable or enable them at different points. So let's see. Let's go to my lone app, which is a logic app. And I've enabled a diagnostic here. So let's see. So let's go into diagnostic settings. So what you can do with your diagnostic logs is you can either archive them to a storage account. Let's say you have compliance requirements for having an archive of diagnostic logs. You can do that. You can stream them to an event hub. And again, you can use something like Power BI to have stream analytics on it. Or what I think is the most interesting thing is you can send it to Log Analytics, which is a deep integration with Operations Management Suite, OMS. So let's actually take a look at that and see how that works. So when I click on that, it actually opens up the specific OMS workspace, right? And then what I can do is I can go into my OMS workspace. Let's see. OK, let me just go a different route. Right. So I just clicked on log search, and that led me to an OMS workspace that I've already configured. And when I click on log search over here, it opens up my OMS workspace directly inside my Azure portal, right? So let me just type the simplest of queries here, star. And it tells me I have 52K logs, and it took a second to load those. For those of you who attended the keynote session yesterday, you would have seen that the person who presented had 60 million or so logs. I just wanted to make sure my demo works for sure, so I made sure I had much fewer logs in my OMS workspace. But the basic idea is it's very scalable. For millions of logs, you can load it in a second or a few seconds. And here it tells you all the different types of logs you have. So in my OMS workspace, I only have Azure log set up. But if you had, let's say, a private cloud on VMware or logs coming in from AWS, you could potentially send them to the same OMS workspace, and you could look at them in the same environment, right? And you can filter. Let's say I want to only look at diagnostic logs. So then it's gonna filter it down to 9K results from the bigger number I had before, and I can go into these, and it gives me a bunch of other things I can filter on. Now, as a developer or an IT pro, you might not know the internal protocols of every single Azure resource. So for example, I have no idea what direction_s means, right? I have no clue. So what we do is make sure that it's easy for you to get started with log search analytics. And how that happens is, apart from this log search, where you can go into things and find them when you know exactly what you're looking for. We also offer solution packs. So let me give you an example of that. So instead of log search, if you click on overview, it's going to take me into the solution packs I've configured. So I've configured the solution pack for activity logs, and this is something that's provided by the Operation Management Suite team by talking to a bunch of customers and figuring out, hey, what are the most common scenarios for charts and graphs that people want when they're looking at activity logs. And look at how pretty this looks. This is like, and you can like drill into those. So basically, it's kind of like, instead of having an Excel file with like thousands of rows and columns, which might be like hard to grow up and make sense of, we have like, we've sort of created like nice charts and graphs for you to look at. And then you can pin those individually to your dashboard. And let's see what it looks like when everything is pinned to the dashboard. So here is a single dashboard I have. So let me quickly talk through it. On this column, I have everything on the platform side. So the earlier graph I had made on HTTP requests and errors, I've pinned to my dashboard, and I can see what's happening on my platform level. Here on the same dashboard, I have stuff coming in from application insights, right? So things like page view load times, failed requests, server response times. And then, again, on the same dashboard, I have my OMS solution packs. So things like security and audit, system update assessment, which just gives me an overview of how many of my machines need updates, SQL, and VMware monitoring, which right now I don't have set up. And for those of you who attended the keynote session yesterday, I also have a bunch of stuff coming in from Security Center. And security is obviously important, even though I'm not focusing on that right now. So you have everything right from your platform metrics to your application level metrics to your enterprise-wide IT metrics spanning Azure and your on-prem or your multiple public cloud environments. So let's switch back to the slides. So here you have the same kind of dashboard, but in a much cooler black theme. I wish I'd configured that. It would have looked much cooler than the blue color palette I have right now. So just the same thing. You have platform monitoring, application monitoring, OMS solutions, and potentially Security Center, all of it in a single dashboard. And what you can do is you can edit this dashboard so you can like look at specifically the resources and the diagnostics that you are interested in. You can even share them with different people in your team. So everyone doesn't have to start from scratch. You can just share it among your team, and it's just like any other resource on Azure. It's completely shareable, just like you share any other resource. All right, so that's it for Azure Monitor. So just some high-level highlights. So Azure Monitor gives you easy discovery with just a single entry point for your end-to-end monitoring across platform, application, and enterprise-wide IT deployments. For platform level resource metrics, you have logs coming in at 1 minute granularity and 30-day retention, and all of this is set up for you right out of the box. You don't need to set up a storage account. You don't need to do anything. It's just there. And you can set up a single dashboard to monitor everything, as I showed in the previous slide. There's deep integration with application insights for monitoring custom metrics and application level metrics, and with OMS for log analytics across your entire IT deployment. And of course, we are a platform, so it directly integrates with a rich ecosystem of partner monitoring tools. So if you're already using incident managing software, APM monitoring solutions, ChatOps, we have a bunch of them that you can directly integrate with. So here are some of our partners in the space that we integrate with. And let's hear from a customer who's actually used one of these. I think it's Datadog, and how they're using Datadog in conjunction with Azure.
My name is John Keane. I'm the CTO for All Recipes and Meredith Digital Food Groups. All Recipes is a leading digital food brand in the world, and we serve a community of 80 million home cooks. Our 24 sites receive over 1 billion visits every year from these home cooks who are looking to both solve a immediate task, like to construct a meal, or to be inspired to find something new to cook. Whatever that is, they come to us at these moments when they need us to help both deliver on the task for them, but also inspire them in some way. These moments of needs tend to create a traffic pattern that is very, very spiky across the year. Day before Thanksgiving is our canonical example of that, where we receive a month's worth of traffic in a single day. So we had a legacy environment that over the years acquired many different patchwork solutions that worked together, but it wasn't the way that you would construct it if you were building it new. We needed a partner in our hosting experience that would allow us to scale and compress and would self-heal and would react and handle the ups and downs of our traffic on a day, weekly, monthly basis. Datadog really integrates very tightly with Azure's monitoring APIs and allows us to see things that are going on in the Azure environment in real time and respond to events. On the other side, we also get access to a Cortana analytics and cognitive insights platform that really allows us to help drive some improved recommendations and behavior for our customers. Datadog allowed us to create this single pane of glass in our build environment that would show us build over build and show them how they're performing. If there's alerts that are triggered, it'll trigger right away. It'll show up in Slack so the team can react. And likewise, if somebody's looking at a dashboard or graph, they'll see it instantly. Azure's partnership with Datadog enables us to realize the full potential of Azure as well as Datadog within our production environment. I mean, in the end, this is really about serving the needs of these 85 million cooks that I mentioned earlier worldwide. And I think now with this partnership between the two companies, it'll make it even easier as we go forward.
Cool. All right, so let's say now that you've set up your monitoring, either through the first-party Azure Monitor solution that we have or through third-party software that you might already be using. And now you've figured out there's something wrong with one of your resources or one of your applications. How can you sort of diagnose that in a self-help sort of way without having to reach out to Azure support every time? So for that, what we've done is we've built an experience called Diagnose and Solve Problems. So right from within the Azure portal, you can go into Diagnose and Solve Problems, and what it's going to do is it's going to give you a curated list of some common problems. And this curation is based on actual support cases which we've had in the recent past, let's say over the last 3 years or so. And it's going to give you an actionable step-by-step way to try to resolve that problem. And of course, if you're not able to resolve the problem, we give you a way inside the portal to create a support ticket. And I'm going to show you guys how that works as well. Another thing that's available within the Azure portal is something called Resource Health. Think about this as an individual heartbeat for your Azure resources. So at a high level, we tell you if your Azure resource is available or unavailable, and if it's unavailable, we try our best to tell you why it's unavailable. And of course, like with everything, it's accessible through an API, so you can integrate resource health metrics into your third-party monitoring apps as well. Then we also have targeted communications within the Azure portal. This is different from what you might be used to seeing on the Azure public status dashboard that gives you a bunch of, it gives you a list of outages and disruptions across geographies and services. This is a signed-in experience that's available within your Azure portal, so it's specific to your Azure environment, to the services that you have configured and the regions that you have deployed them in. And you can filter by region, events, and different date ranges. And we also publish post-mortem reports on when things go wrong, why they go wrong, and what we are doing to mitigate them, and so on. So let's do a quick demo of Diagnostics as well. So let's see. Let me take a look at virtual machines. So let's say that my diagnostic logs told me that, hey, there's something wrong with one of my virtual machines. So let's take a look at them. Let's see. This is a Windows virtual machine that's part of my loan application. And I can click here on Diagnose and Solve Problems. And when I do that, it's going to load a bunch of common problems which are based off of actual support tickets that our customer support team has got from customers, right? So stuff like, hey, I can't connect to my Windows VM, can't restart or resize an existing VM, VM is slow, SQL-related issues with virtual machines, and so on. And when you click into these, you get a step-by-step instruction of how you can potentially solve for this. And this is a great way for you to try to resolve problems before having to engage with Azure support. Having said that, we do provide a way for you to create support tickets automatically, and let's see how you can do that. So another thing I talked about was resource health. So right now I see it's available, so that's great. Let's click into more details to find out if at any point in the last 2 weeks this resource was unavailable. Click on View History. Looks like within the last 14 days this resource was available, so that's great. If for some reason the resource health check told me the machine is unavailable, we provide you an easy way from within the portal to contact Azure support. So when you do that, let's see what comes up. So here's a simple way for you to create a Azure support ticket from within the portal. And keep in mind, anytime an Azure resource in your environment fails a health check, we offer a 24/7 break fix free of cost. So that's just included as part of your Azure subscription. So here you can tell us if it's a mission critical or not a critical production issue. You can tell us your preferred contact method, either through email or phone. So let's say it's a mission critical app, you probably want someone to phone you right away. And then you can create a support ticket right away. Let me go back to my virtual machines and open up a Linux virtual machine, because Microsoft loves Linux, and see what happens when I click on Diagnose and Solve Problems over here. Aha, it's context aware. It knows this is a Linux virtual machine, so all of the common problems and steps that I get here will be specific to Linux, right? And you can create a support ticket in the same way. So let's go back to our presentation. That's a great segue to talk about our support offerings, right? So as I mentioned, included in your Azure subscription is 24/7/365, or in the case of last year, 366, since it was a leap year. Included support, right? So you can create a support, if at any point a resource fails a health check, you can create a support ticket, and we'll look into that for you. Beyond that is a plan called developer support. Now, how you should think about that is, let's say you're just starting off building applications in Azure, right? And you have some questions, there are some things you need technical help with. You can leverage our developer support plan, and we'll have those questions answered for you. So things like, hey, how do I build my applications for high availability, scalability, the stuff we talked about earlier, but how do you do that in a way that's specific to your environment? Now, beyond that, anytime you have production environments in Azure, you want to make sure that you have a support plan beyond developer support. And here we have 3 tiers of support: Standard, Pro, Direct, and Premier support. And in a case where you have a mission-critical workload, let's say you're launching a new product and you're expecting a huge spike in traffic, we really encourage you to go for our Azure Rapid Response Support Plan. We have a dedicated rapid response team that's ideally geared up towards dealing with those massive launch types of scenarios. So that's an overview of our support offerings. And of course, tweet us. Our handle for support is @AzureSupport. We are very, very active on Twitter. Our typical response time is within 6 minutes of a customer tweet. We field any questions that you might have related to your Azure environment on this Twitter handle, and we route it to the appropriate engineering team. We also publish postmortems on our Twitter account, so anytime there is an outage or a service impacting incident, a detailed postmortem of what happened, what went wrong, what steps we took to mitigate all of that will be published on our Twitter feed. So subscribe to Azure Support. Great, so that brings me towards the end of the presentation. So action items for you guys going out of this meeting: make sure to check out the azure.com/resiliency webpage. all of the stuff that I talked about in terms of high availability and scalability is a great starting point, but it's not a comprehensive list. And you can get more detailed reference architectures and ARM templates and checklists on the resiliency page. Also check out documentation for Azure Monitor. So I know I covered a lot of stuff in the demo, and you might want to take a look at that again. And also check out the third-party partner integrations that I talked about, especially if you're already using a tool that you want to leverage. OK, time for a couple more quiz questions. So can anyone tell me, on Azure Monitor for platform-level metrics, what's the time granularity that we offer to you guys? OK, cool. One more. Can anyone tell me on Azure Monitor for platform-level metrics, how many days of data retention do you get right out of the box without configuring anything? Cool. Looks like all of you guys are paying attention. Awesome. Great. All right, so we still have a few minutes. Any questions? Yes. Yeah, that's a good point. So there's two different things. So there's activity logs and there's metrics. For activity logs, you get 90 days out of the box. For metrics, which are more continuous, like CPU utilization and RAM usage, it's 30 days. So there is that distinction. Good catch. Yes. 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 Yes, so it's tightly integrated with the RBAC, role-based access control. So if those people do not have access to those resources, they will not be able to see the logs for them, so they would need to have access to them, of course. Cool. Any other questions? Sure. Yeah, so we don't have a mobile app. What we have is, like I mentioned, you can set up alerts and notifications. And in private preview, we actually have SMS capabilities as well, which will go live shortly. But we don't have a mobile app right now. You can get emails and SMS alerts and webhooks. But you could use potentially one of our third-party providers. I'm not sure if any of them have mobile apps, but that's one way you could look into doing that. All right, thanks a lot, guys.